Welcome to People in Innovation, a CPI podcast where we explore the extraordinary and impactful stories of people driving innovation to create a better future for people, places and our planet. From groundbreaking discoveries to the challenges behind the breakthroughs, we shine a light on the people behind the innovation that are shaping our future. Today we're talking to Daniel Peters, the CEO of MarraBio, a Newcastle University spin-out and also a portfolio company of CPI Enterprises.
Hi Dan, great to see you in sunny Newcastle today. How's things?
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. It's really good to be here and thanks for inviting me to come and talk to you today.
No problem. I'm really interested actually. This morning I was looking through some of the information that we get as a manager of the investment that we've made into MarraBio. I can see that you're making lots of great progress. So I'm really excited actually to have the opportunity to ask you about a few of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it.
The other thing as well is just before we get started, I'm not actually resident in Newcastle and I know that you are. Whereabouts are you based at the minute and how does this look to you? Because it seems like quite a lot of activity in Newcastle at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been a big change, and especially seeing this sort of Helix site develop and, you know, there'll be new space for not only the kind of academic part of Newcastle University, but also space for technical spin-outs, database spin-outs, and also the biosphere across the road for life sciences startups as well. It's been really interesting to see over the time that I've lived here how Newcastle's developed, and not only the universities sort of growing, expanding, moving into new areas, but also the sort of startup and more commercial scene really beginning to develop and kick off. I think it's a really exciting time for the city.
It's great to hear. How long have you been in Newcastle?
I've been here since 2015, so almost 10 years now.
Right, okay. And you started in university doing your postdoc?
Yes, that's right, yeah. So I was at York previously, where I did my sort of undergrad and PhD, and then moved up to join Professor Jeremy Laker's lab in 2015, and then just sort of kept going from there, really.
It's quite a journey, because I expect that the transition from an academic role into actually a CEO, effectively driving forward a really exciting spin-out, was quite a jump. How have you found that? Is it an interesting process, presumably?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It's not something I ever really expected to do. I saw my career being a very kind of traditional academic path, you know, PhD, postdoc, fellowship, lectureship, you know, professorship. But the thing is with that journey, it's, you know, it's very difficult to do. It's sort of difficult to secure grants. It's very competitive. And I think what's been really exciting about this journey is actually there's this whole wide world of stuff out there that's, you know, beyond the kind of scientific academic realm. And it's really fun to kind of get involved in that and actually feel like you're making sort of more of an impact and being interfacing with not just, you know, fellow scientists and academics, but, you know, sort of lawyers, business people, policymakers, all sorts of interesting areas to get involved in.
It's funny you bring up lawyers. I'm kind of similar in that respect because I had a quite traditional route before I joined CPI. So 2015, actually, same year for me, I transitioned into an in-house role at CPI. And it's such an interesting environment. The entrepreneurs and the things that they're working on are really why I'm still there 10 years later. I just find that it's such a dynamic environment and the people that we work with tend to be really passionate about that real-world application. Did your kind of thought process shift between academic and, because presumably taking something that is going to have real world application and understanding where it fits, it's quite a journey. I think you've mentioned previously actually that you did some of the programs to help you on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I think it's really difficult because it's a complete change in mindset from just thinking what's kind of most scientifically exciting thing you can do. You know, when you're an academic, it's all about what's the best paper I can get, what's going to have the biggest sort of splash amongst my peers. And I think that's great. And obviously you need that blue skies research to drive any kind of technology developments. But where I began to have a bit of a problem with it is that I felt, you know, it was just doing the same thing and that outside of quite a limited field, that it wasn't necessarily, you know, having a big impact, but not many people necessarily cared about the research I was doing. And what I really wanted to do was get the technology, which I thought would be really exciting and make a big difference in various different application areas, and just really take that into the real world and really test it in the marketplace to see, you know, is it a real thing? Is it as good as I think it is? And I think that's really the difference in mindset between academia and commercial, is that you can make something in academia that works once and gives you a really cool paper, but on the commercial side, you've really got to test it to destruction and not only test it in a technical capacity, develop products, do quality control, but also find the right market fit. And that's where the programs kind of came in, particularly a program called the iCure program.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of a turning point for me personally, because the goal of this is you get about 3 months out of the lab fully funded to go and talk to, the goal is about 100 people in industry. So you have to speak to different market sectors, and the aim isn't to sell your technology or to kind of convince someone to buy it or to fund you or anything like that, but really to find out what the problems are that are in the marketplace, what are real industry professionals dealing with, what do they need fixed, and then to find out, okay, can the technology I've developed potentially fix that? And if so, how big is the scale of the problem, who might want it, and what do I need to do to be able to enable it to solve those people's issues?
Yeah, I think that's one of the first things that we think about as an investor, is really understanding what that real problem is and what the solution is that the entrepreneur's bringing forwards. I think that's a well thought out pitch to always start with that core problem that you're trying to solve. So Dan, we've obviously invested in MarraBio, and I understand the platform technology, but it'd be good to hear you talk about it in your own words in terms of what the technology is and what it will be used for.
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of people and applications for growing cells outside the body. So this is taking different types of cells and using them either for therapy or food production. But the problem is, to be able to grow these cells, you have to give them the right sort of biological cues. They need the right signals to be able to grow and behave properly. And the way that people do that at the moment, it's very expensive, it's kind of not that scalable, and it's quite sort of difficult to do. It's very labor intensive. So what we're trying to do is essentially engineer these bacterial proteins that we've found, and they've got a number of interesting properties. They're really highly stable. They're a bit like a molecular Lego set. They're highly modular, so you can click different bits together.
Oh, wow.
They're free from kind of animal materials, so they're made in bacteria, so you can avoid all the safety and ethical issues involved in that. And what we do is engineer them to mimic the action of these other proteins, essentially allowing them to supply the right kind of signals and cues to cells, but with all the other advantages that I just mentioned. So we're hoping to make it as a kind of a culture supplement for people who are growing cells at large scale, whether it's for food, therapy, or research.
Oh, wow. Do you know what? As a laywoman, somebody once said to me that cells were fussy,
Yeah.
and that's one of the challenges that you're overcoming with your particular technology then, the ability to put them together and grow them in a way that they're not so fussy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're just trying to make it kind of cheaper, easier, sort of more cost-effective, more scalable, to hopefully unlock some of these technologies and sort of both allow these kind of new therapies to reach more people, but also hopefully revolutionize what's going on with novel foods as well.
I know actually that your technology, it's got a different application in different areas. Can you just explain a bit more about MarraBio's technology and the fact that it's a platform with application in different sectors?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So what we've been developing over quite a long period of time now is an engineered bacterial protein polymer. So these things, they have quite a number of unusual properties. They're really stable, they don't involve any animal material, and we can engineer them to basically mimic the actions of some of the other proteins you might use when growing cells. And the great thing about this is, people need cells for all different things. So people need cells for new therapies. There's been stuff in the news about these kind of revolutionary new cancer treatments people have got. But also it's useful in kind of new food sources as well. So there's been, again, in the news, a lot of stuff about cultivated meat. So the process of growing animal cells to make food without you needing the animal. But the problem with all of these sorts of technologies is that to be able to get them to work at scale, you need a lot of different factors. It's scientifically quite complicated to get these things to grow. And it's really expensive, and there's a huge technical and also economic and sort of logistical challenge. And that's what we're trying to solve by basically engineering biology to be able to make products that can sort of help streamline this, kind of reduce labor costs and reduce materials costs, and just kind of make the whole process easier, faster, and also more sustainable.
I know that you were really successful actually in securing some Innovate UK grants, and indeed one of them was actually working with our biotechnology area at Wilton. Would you just explain how that's going and how CPI is supporting on that scale-up journey?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think that it's a really good example of how sort of that kind of targeted Innovate UK funding can help support really collaborative partnerships between different commercial entities and also some research organizations like CPI, where we can really leverage the sort of skills, experience, and equipment that you have at CPI to be able to solve all sorts of different problems. So in this particular grant, what we're aiming to do is take our technology, which at the moment is sort of applicable for research use. And what we want to do is be able to enable it to be produced for food use, so we can actually target some of these cultivated meat companies. But obviously, if it's a novel food, you need to make sure that it's going to be safe for people to eat. And so, the regulatory space, people are still kind of working on this because it's a very novel area. And so there's a kind of regulatory challenge in working out what do we need to do in order to ensure that it's safe, that it's high enough quality. And then there's also the technical challenge of actually analyzing kind of what's in our production process, what have we made. So where we've been able to interface with CPI on this is using, first of all, the analytics team. They've got like a ton of equipment that's sort of, ultra high tech, the sort of thing we could never afford in a million years. And then also pairing that with some really talented and enthusiastic scientists who can kind of actually sort of work through these various problems and help us to really analyze, the purity of our material, and help to also engage with us on how we might improve our production process to generate these kind of food-grade quality materials. And then alongside that, at the sort of centre at Wilton, you've got regulatory experts who've been conducting things like food hazard analysis and sort of looking into the regulatory aspects to ensure that what we can do is be able to sort of answer these questions when we go to customers who might have them when they're developing new food products. And then also as part of this, we're working with another Newcastle-based spin-out company called Alias Biotech. And what they've got is a model of the human gut system. Oh, wow. So we can then look at like how, if you were to eat this material, what would happen? And obviously we're hoping for a really boring result, that nothing happens and that it's safe to eat. But it's really great to have other organizations based in the Northeast who can bring these different sort of equipment, systems and talents to bear on our problem, and hopefully develop a new product that can be used to generate novel foods in the UK.
That's fantastic. Actually, that reminds me, so you were working not just with the one technology area at CPI, it was actually across Darlington as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're hoping, there's other, there's a materials unit. I think there's so many areas of expertise in CPI across the different departments, not just, regulatory, analytical, but materials, development, all sorts of things. And going forward, we're really hoping to kind of continue to build that relationship and sort of interface in some of the other areas of CPI that we haven't even got to yet.
Brilliant. That's really great to hear, actually. Just going back, actually, to the collaborator on that project and how are you finding the ecosystem from an entrepreneurial perspective in the Northeast? How did you get in touch with that partner, and what are you seeing at university level? Are you seeing more spin-outs through the gates at the minute, or is there an enthusiasm there that wasn't there previously?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's helpful that they're based just a couple of floors down from us. So
right, okay.
When it's people you kind of meet in the corridors and things, and you think it was actually it was at I think a BVSRC funded workshop on cultivated meat, and they brought in local academics from different departments, not just scientific but sociology and philosophy as well, along with local spin-outs. CPI were there as well, and kind of just sort of working through some of the problems and the technical challenges facing the sector. And, over coffee, you sort of get talking to some of the other companies and think, oh, hang on, when you're writing a grant, their technology will be an absolute game changer for what it is that we're working on and trying to do. So, and I think there is a lot more. I feel like it's quite an exciting time to be, particularly in the spin-out company. I think it's, at the moment, I think it's clearer to the UK what the value is of spin-outs to the UK ecosystem. And I think there's now more support from the universities, from other organisations and the catapults, and also from funding agencies like Innovate, and also investors as well, to try and get more things moving from academia into into industry. And it's really nice, particularly in the Northeast. There's quite a lot of sort of small spin-outs all working in similar areas, and having a peer group and other people you can easily collaborate with and connect with, I think is really exciting.
Yeah.
And CPI helped to facilitate a lot of these things, which I think is a really useful function as well.
Yeah, it's one of the things I like coming to the Catalyst for, actually, because as soon as you walk through that cafe area, I can usually see 2 or 3 people that I know that I've maybe spoken to about their own spin-outs, and understand the journey that they're going on towards securing investment. Because to be honest, it's not easy, and it's not everybody that's able to do that. Can you tell us more about that investment journey? Because looking at the reports, there's quite a gap emerging at this early stage deep tech space.
And I think it is hard, because I think it's a difficult climate at the moment anyway.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's difficult when you've got to make some of these sort of decisions about which things are likely to succeed and which not. And it's the same with funding agencies. It's always hard to know what is the best use of money, and you'd like to fund everything, but it's not always the case, is it?
No.
So yeah, I mean, we started this journey. I mean, it was about 30 years ago now, so it's quite a long time in academia beforehand. So it's the work of Professor Jeremy Lakey, who was a professor at Newcastle University, and he was working on the molecule that we're interested in as part of a vaccine project. So it's something completely unrelated to what we're doing now. And just over the years, as he was working on this with other collaborators, he began to realize that there was kind of quite a few unusual molecular aspects of this. And this sort of led on to sort of kind of gradually larger and larger funding pots. And I think the first kind of big inflection for us was some money from something Catalyst. And it was money from Innovate UK, BVSRC and EPSRC that basically helped to give us a 5-year project to bring together 4 different postdocs, which I was one. Our CTO, Dr. Helen Waller, was another one as well.
Yes, Helen, yeah.
Bioprocessing expert. And then there was also a postdoc in chemistry and a postdoc on the cell biology side. So it was a really nice interdisciplinary project.
Yeah.
And this funding basically gave us the opportunity to explore what we could do with this molecule, whether there was anything interesting, always with the view that there should be a commercial application at the end. And so we sort of went through that. It gave us the time to kind of work out what we were doing. There was some follow-on money, which allowed us to kind of further hone down what we were working on. But then I think the other key inflection for us on our investment journey was we went to a program called Exec into Business, which is funded by Northern Accelerator, so a Northeast-based
I think I've heard of it. Yeah,
they've got some really great programs for people kind of going on the journey from academia to industry.
Yep.
And in particular, this one, it's funding for someone with a lot of commercial experience to come and join the team. So we got our executive chairman, Aidan Courtney, who joined us.
Yep.
And Aidan's brilliant because he's got lots of experience in building early stage technology companies. His background, again, a little bit similar to yours in a way, in that he has a background in kind of economics, accountancy, and also law, and then has kind of gradually got sort of seduced by this kind of technology development side. But having him join the team was really important because it meant that we had someone with that commercial experience to take us as a team of academics and scientists who didn't really know much about industry, investment, finance, or anything like that, and really helping us to get the business plan together, get the right strategy, and really taking the team forward with that commercial experience. So that by the time that we, were introduced to yourselves and got to talk to you, I think, we'd done a few pitches before, but hopefully we'd upped our game enough that you could kind of see that we had a really great founding team and hopefully, an interesting technology as well.
It really shone through, actually, that mix of different disciplines and skill sets that you brought together in a team. It's a bit similar, actually, to the journey I went through with Enterprises and building our investor relations and ventures arm. Because, like you say, it's not just one person, it's a team effort. I came from a particular skill set and I was learning as I went, but I had the benefit of working with some really experienced people. Peter, who joined us as an investment manager. Ian, one of our first actually employees into the team, he was very focused on the commercial relationships. And then I've been able to build a team around that. Tom, I think you met Tom.
Yeah, of course.
He's our investment associate, and he'd done a range of different roles within the CPI organisation that just meant we had a nice fit. Actually, I found that one of the most rewarding bits of my job, that I've been able to build a team and that we work together like that. How are you finding that? Who manages the people conversations? And I know you're quite a small-knit, close-knit team, but how is that working out for you?
Yeah, I mean, brilliantly. I totally agree with you that it does. I think that's probably the most exciting and rewarding thing about this has been not just building the team, but working together with them. So, we started out, it was sort of just me and Aidan and, the other founders. And then gradually, particularly since we got the investment, last September, we've been able to then use that as well as the Innovate UK grants to sort of grow from just sort of 2 people to, I think we're 8, hopefully 9 in a couple of weeks. And so it's really fun. And I think, all the people we've got in, we always sort of look for people with, I think, the sort of the right kind of mindset, which is sort of really, kind of business focused, but also collaborative. And we have a lot of fun in doing these things. It's really, it's sort of really fast paced and exciting. And I think that's one of the main differences between this and the academic research is that, in academia, you're sort of on your own, even when you're as part of a lab group, you're just sort of churning away at your own project. Whereas with this, we're all working and pulling together on the same thing. Everyone's got, different expertises. Yeah, like, you said when you were building your team, and everyone's just so enthusiastic. And I think part of the reason for that is because we can see that impact at the end.
Yeah.
And just, that's what makes working on this a joy, is that you're working towards something that's really interesting, really exciting. And then you've also surrounded by really talented, motivated people who, are joining you on this journey. And I think that's what I'm enjoying most about the process, I think.
Yeah.
So Hannah, we knew about CPI as a sort of facilitator of process innovation and development. So we were kind of surprised when we found out about, that there was also an investment arm. How did that get started?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And actually, we're celebrating 20 years of CPI, and that's exactly what we're known for being that convener and the support on the scale-up journey for entrepreneurs like yourself in the areas where we've got various innovation assets in the north of England, and actually now up in Scotland as well. But yeah, the investment activities are relatively new within the organisation. We always knew that private investment was a large part of the entrepreneur's journey. And it quickly became apparent that actually private investment was something that we needed to have a better grip on. And the first phase was to start the partnering, so to understand what investors were interested in and start having that two-way relationship so that we could understand what they were interested in, what they were seeing, and equally we could support some of the companies in our ecosystem to secure investment as well. So it was in 2019 that the board approved the business plan for Enterprises. And Alfredo and myself, we actually recommended that we felt we should look at strategic investments as well as an angle, because the credibility to investors in that community was that we were willing to put our skin in the game, and that we thought, and actually it was proved true, that we've got a good eye for new technologies with a commercial application. So 2019 really was the year when we started in earnest, and quite an interesting experience actually, because not long after we entered lockdown. So it was a time of building a team, trying to work out how we plugged into the rest of the organisation, and grappling with hybrid working, not to mention homeschooling and the other challenges that came out of COVID. So it was a really interesting time, but it gave us a good platform really to connect with investors, because it was an unusual pause in activity in business as usual. So by the time we met MarraBio, we were just coming into our own, and we were starting to build a track record for investing in that early stage space. 5 years later, and a great portfolio of investments that we've made, it's exciting times because we're now thinking what's next for us? What does that next phase look like? And I think we've got great potential to start attracting other investors alongside what we're doing at CPI. Now is the time for us to start thinking about the next 5 years and how do we amplify that.
So 20 years of CPI, 5 years anniversary of CPIE, what would you say you're most proud of during that time?
When people ask me why do I work at CPI, what gets me out of bed in the morning, it's definitely the team that I work with, and it's looking at some of the really bright, enthusiastic innovators and entrepreneurs like yourself, Dan, that come through the doors and pitch to us. We've got so many interesting companies in the portfolio, and I just think if one of those technologies makes it, it will have a massive real-world impact. So, if I'm looking back in 10 years' time and thinking, what am I proud of? It'll be that starting point of investing in companies that I really do think will change the future. Talking of which, the impact that you'll have, the real world application, coming back to that, because I just think that that's really that end goal of understanding how you're going to create a healthier society or a cleaner environment. And what actually is part of our purpose at CPI, that we always think about impact as much as our financial objectives. So taking it back, engineering biology seems to be a very new theme, although it's been around for years. People are starting to pick up as a bit of a trend. How do you see that applying to the world that we live in, and what do you think the promise is for the future?
Yeah, I think it's an incredibly exciting area, and it was something I was really keen to move into when I first sort of came to Newcastle 10 years ago. And I think we could see, I guess during the Industrial Revolution, when people started working with new materials, new machines, new modes of power, so all the exciting kind of developments that could happen in society. And I think with biology now, it's something that we've understood less and still don't necessarily understand all that well.
Yeah.
But it gives us new bits and pieces that we can use to work with. And of course, everything's on a much smaller scale. And you've got that ready interface with things like, health and food and the environment and other things like that. So I think it's really exciting to take our knowledge of the life sciences and then use that to develop new tools and materials. And I think the applications you can have from that, especially working on that really small scale, are really cool.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really enjoy about our technology and this work is just, you don't just stick with what's nature's given you. You can take what's already really exciting and then build upon it. And I think that's really fun to make new things.
I must admit, whenever I see something in our investment committee, I just instantly take it back to, well, what is that going to look like for me in my day-to-day? One of the things that I think about, I'm actually a vegetarian, and I know that your product could potentially be used in alternative proteins. What's the environment like? And I mean, it seems like it's got massive potential, but what are the barriers at the minute? Why aren't we all eating test tube grown steak at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is it's incredibly complex to do. I mean, people have been growing cells for a long time. And even growing cells for therapy, I think, is a fairly new thing. And it's all right to kind of make a small number of cells in a small volume, but being able to then scale that up, everything's been developed sort of for the pharmaceutical industry, which means that it's all quite expensive, and it doesn't necessarily. I think we need new ways of doing this bioprocessing, which is one of the things we're aiming to work with, that enable you to grow these really large numbers of cells at a sort of in a large volume in an economically viable way. And so that's one of the things we're trying to solve. I think it's also one of the other problems is that you have to have very skilled people doing it. And I think that's one of the things that I think other organizations in the Northeast are trying to solve. For example, there are apprentices at CPI, there's the National Horizons Institute in Teesside.
That skill's so important, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think as we train more and more people up to be able to do that, and also at the same time reducing labour costs from the technical side, hopefully they'll become more viable. And then you've got also the regulatory challenge of, these things are so novel. Is it safe? What are the nutritional aspects and things like that? And I know that there's people in the university here in the nutrition department looking at that kind of side of things as well. There's the social aspects. Will people want to eat it? Is it suitable for vegetarians? What are the ethics about that? And then I guess, finally, you've got the sort of actual food science bit of it. How do you formulate this stuff and get the right texture and the right taste? And so I think what's exciting about the space, I think, is there are a lot of big challenges, but that's where small companies can come in to sort of do kind of small, quite risky but fast-moving things and solve different bits of the problem. And particularly, in the various grants and collaborations we're working with other small companies and larger organizations as well. We've got one piece of the puzzle and other people have got other pieces. And hopefully by putting these together, we can have a really great solution that will hopefully unlock these technologies.
Yeah. I mean, coming back to that grant funding, how important it is to bring together the right consortia to tackle different problems. So at CPI, I've got the responsibility for looking after our bid development team. Absolutely superb set of people, so passionate about what they do. I actually think it must be one of the most difficult but one of the most rewarding jobs at CPI, bringing all that together in a really compelling application in the way that, can you give us an idea of how much time and effort actually goes into that? Because to be successful with grant funding now in such a competitive environment, you have to really be on the top of your game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very difficult. I mean, it does take a long time, but not necessarily because the application is complex, but it's more you have to take very complex ideas and distill them in a way that not only kind of gets your point across, but also sort of makes sense to reviewers who might not be experts in your field. So, and it's not just a case of saying, oh, this is my project idea, I want to do this, and focusing on the science. You have to include things like the impact, the ethics, what the societal impacts are going to be, and to make sure that what you're doing is sort of responsible and also going to be good value for money for the taxpayer too. Yep. So it is hard, and I think kind of trying to put together very complex sort of 12, 18, even longer projects into sort of 400 words is quite tricky. But the fun side of it, I think, is coming up with the idea, but also then finding the partners together. And I think, working with the bids team at CPI, on the grants that we have, and hopefully, some more in the future, it's really nice kind of being able to build some of those consortia, and it's very exciting to consider working with people on these big problems.
Yeah. I know, actually, coming back to Newcastle and our surroundings, because I was just looking at board report recently, and I understand that you're based in Newcastle at the moment. What's your future ambition? Because like you said, you're a team of 8 now, you're growing exponentially. What's next in terms of location and team building for you?
I mean, we're very much hoping to stay here in Newcastle in the northeast.
Great.
I think it's a fantastic place to put down roots. The reason is, I mean, as we've sort of said, it's great, but there's a mixture of smaller and larger organizations all around. It's a brilliant place to live. You've got several universities that have fantastic sort of motivated graduates. And I think because it's such a good place to live, a lot of them, they finish their degrees, they want to do something, exciting and useful with what they've learned, but they don't necessarily, they want to maybe stay for family reasons or just because they like it. And so one of the things I'm really hoping we'll be able to do moving forward is continue to supply those kind of high-tech job opportunities in the Northeast, so that, when people are finishing not just university, but school as well, that they have sort of really exciting job opportunities to be able to go into that enables them to stay here. And also just driving economic growth in the region. It's not we don't have quite as much funding here in the Northeast as in other regions of the UK.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I think being able to build that base, show people as well what the value is of what we've got here. I think the main problem that we face is just there's a lack of lab space and opportunities, and that's probably one of our major challenges going forward into the next year, is moving out of the university and finding somewhere that's going to be appropriate for us to go into, particularly thinking about production processes, high grades of material, and kind of meeting these regulatory requirements. I'm hoping that there'll be, as the spin-out scene and the UK kind of innovation economy continues to grow, that there'll be more opportunities for people to have the right space for them.
Yeah, I think the combined authority are really interested in putting a spotlight on companies like MarraBio to be able to show what's possible to investors and to other academics thinking about that spin-out journey. If there was some kind of support that you could ask the combined authority for, what would it be then? Obviously, you mentioned the lack of lab space. Can you just expand or maybe think about what support or intervention would be useful for a company like yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of it is having, I think for very early stage companies like ours, having sort of correct incubator space which there is some of in Newcastle, but I think there needs to be more as there's more and more companies coming through. So having somewhere which is kind of set up for companies to move into rather than taking up space in the university that might not be the most appropriate place for them. So having something for early stage companies that's sort of affordable, but also gives them enough space to kind of set up and get things like manufacturing growing to get first products out. But I think also in terms of having that support, there's a lot of disused space, I think, not just in Newcastle, but in other places across the UK, particularly as after COVID, where more people are working from home, maybe there's fewer office spaces. So potentially, if more of those kind of areas can be converted, I think not only is it useful for the companies to have somewhere to go to, but also hopefully it'll, maybe revitalise some town and city centres a bit more as more people are kind of coming into work in those areas. Because that's one of the things about lab work is you can't do it from home.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I think hopefully that'll be a good way of converting that space. I think there's other developments like that in other places. So it'd be nice to see some more things like that here in the Northeast too.
Yeah, it's that complete change. After COVID, we stayed actually as a hybrid organisation. And we, flexibility is one thing that we try and offer our staff. It's one of the benefits about working at CPI, and obviously the flexibility in the innovation that we're continually seeing working with different partners. I think that's one of the real selling points about us as an employer. Mm-hmm. But I'm just trying to think about the sales that you're going into now, because you're at quite an interesting, exciting point to actually be selling products. What's been the kind of shift between what does it take to get that first product on the market?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a really interesting journey, I think, for us since last September. We felt like we were quite close. We had something that, we'd done an awful lot of testing on, not just by us, but by external people, by some of the catapult organizations as well. So, you think, okay, well, it's not going to take much to get that out, but actually there's an awful lot of things that you have to do in terms of like thinking about labeling, barcoding, which tubes it's going to go into, who's going to distribute it, who's going to, find customers to sell. And with that, I mean, we're very lucky in that we work with a distributor, which is a company called TCS Biosciences, based in the South, who, a sort of long-established family company. And it's been a really great sort of way of working together with them, in that they've got experience in, liquid handling, bottling products, distributing those things, doing all the kind of nuts and bolts, getting it out the door stuff. And then, of course, we've done all the kind of product development prior to that. So I think it's been really, really fun, actually, kind of working out what those very concrete stages are in taking something from being, oh, I've got it on my bench and it works, to someone can buy this and use it. And I think it's been a really fun journey, actually.
I think when we were looking at MarraBio from an investment perspective, one of the things that really attracted us to the company was the fact that you really thought about those milestones. So we understood that by making the investment, and we worked with a consortium of other investors that invested alongside us, we could understand what your runway is and where you were getting to. So the fact that you could demonstrate that journey up to those commercial sales, and, credit to you, you're delivering on that promise. That was one of the things that we really liked about the investment thesis when it was brought forward from the team.
No, I'm really glad to hear that. I think that was that's one of the things that I really like about working in this company as well, is having that pipeline of products, and saying it's always nice to kind of focus on, okay, what's the next thing we're going to come out? What value is that going to present to customers, and which new markets might it help us to unlock? And we find, as we continue on, there's always kind of more and more surprising things we find. And it's nice now as a company to be able to think, right, okay, but what could be the commercial value of this, rather than just, oh, that's interesting. So, it was nice to, I think, have that recognised by the investment committees. I'm glad that was kind of a good part of it.
Yeah, and I can see it now, actually, in terms of that interplay between the resource and effort you're putting into selling the products, but equally have that pipeline of interesting things coming through. You seem to have got a real good mix and handle on that. I think one of the things that we sometimes struggle with when we see companies is going after too many things, and you can't see what that longer term horizon looks like. So, it's balancing, having a platform that could do a multitude of things, but knowing that you're delivering for investors by going down a particular route and getting sales.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually one of the things I think we sort of most struggled with as well, is that even during, our time in academia, is that you think, oh, we can do everything and everything's really exciting and you want to do everything. But it's focusing on, okay, well, what can we do? What can we do within the, short, medium and long terms? And what do people want us to do as well? And I think having that like voice of the customer, that's one of the things we got through the iCure. But I think that's one of the other really important things that you have to do as a company, and that we need to continue doing as well as we go forward, is making sure you're developing things the market wants, rather than just doing what you think is interesting, and making sure you focus on that. And yes, there might be a lot of exciting things you can do, but those can be left for the future, because actually this is the thing that's going to give you value for both us and the investors now. Yeah,
I think as well with the seed round that you put together, it was 4 investors that came on board. CPI, obviously not your standard fund manager. We're known for our technology and innovation centre services and the scale-up support that we're able to offer. But we wanted to be seen as a value-adding investor, and we wanted to be able to bring other connections to bear, which I think we did through the introductions to other institutional investors who came on board.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you've also got TCS, who I wanted to ask a bit more about, because my understanding is that they've invested as well. So you've got quite a unique mix of CPI as an investor and also helping you on the scale-up journey. You've got TCS on the strategic side, but then you've obviously got the institutionals as well backing that all up. So it seems like a really nice round that you were able to put together. How did that pan out? I've forgotten, actually, how we were introduced in the first place.
Yeah, I was trying to think about that on the way here as well. I was wondering, I'm not sure if it was maybe Aidan got introduced to Peter, or whether it was someone at the university perhaps sort of put us together. I mean, we were certainly surprised, because obviously I'd known about CPI. I think sort of Jeremy, our CSO, had done some work with you before. Yeah. I'd been on a tour of the facilities at Darlington, which was really exciting. And I was kind of didn't know that there was the investment arm of it. So it was really exciting to hear about that when we first found out. And I think, what was really nice was when we sort of began talking was that CPI did help kind of sort of catalyze that round, providing, as you say, the introductions to the investors. And yeah, I completely agree. Having that sort of team of 4, I think, is really useful because it's nice in our board meetings to have the different perspectives around the table, and everyone's got kind of a different angle on it. And CPI obviously TCS obviously know a lot about the products and the distribution and sales. CPI know kind of about the scale up and the technical things, and then you've got the sort of other kind of commercial focuses, the market kind of information, the wider stuff from the institutional investors as well. So I really like the kind of dynamics that we have, on our board at the moment, and I think it was really great how that came together. And I'm really glad that we sort of have the 4 rather than, just sort of having one investor as well. I think it's you think it might be more difficult to manage, but actually, once we got all the legals signed, it's worked really well.
Yeah. It's funny, actually, because I do feel like we were one of the best kept secrets for quite a while. I think the reason that we didn't actively publicise what we were doing on the investment front in the early days was because we knew that the pipeline, the demand would be high.
Yeah.
And, MarraBio, you will be in the top couple of % of companies that we're actually able to invest in. We're investing off balance sheet, and we're really looking for that strategic fit. You ticked a lot of boxes for us in terms of the fit with our technology capabilities, the fact that you knew exactly where you were going and we could see horizons, and obviously the size of the round. And then to top it off, the fact that we can actually have face-to-face board meetings and we get to see you at the Catalyst is really important to us. But yeah, I'm sure that there's plenty more we could do, and that's something that we're actually working on at the moment. So we are thinking about how we can actively attract capital alongside what we're doing with our own balance sheet. We've got some scale-up ideas about what the next phase of enterprises will look like. So it's a really exciting time for us, and I think we do have a unique investment model, being able to actually tap into a really interesting pipeline of opportunities, do the tech due diligence, and then understand how we can support with that scale-up journey. The great thing about CPI, I suppose, and I would say this, is, you get to tap into such amazing innovation assets, great people that you just can't access anywhere else, in the way that you've done with the grant funding and the ability to actually cut across different parts of the organisation. It makes it quite unique, and so we're working on something actually with Innovate UK as well in that investment front. It's that innovation on our own business model and recognising the need in the ecosystem for that investment that I think we're trying to tap into and grow with. So it's really exciting times, plenty of opportunity.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, one of the nice things about, again, working with CPI, as you say, is the kind of value add from, not just what the organisation can bring to bear across its different departments, but also the introductions you can make kind of nationwide, and how that can facilitate not just kind of grant applications, but other commercial, interactions with small and large partners as well. And I mean, one of the sort of things, you get this sort of email through from CPI, and it's like, oh, we're putting together a thought leadership piece on, sustainability in food, and, can we talk to you about this, and can you help? And, that was sort of really fun to do, and kind of comes a bit left field, but it's just another of the kind of benefits of having that relationship with CPI, is that you can, do and take part in things and interact with the people who you wouldn't meet otherwise. And I think it's a really great catalyst for those kind of interactions.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think we take it for granted within our organisation. We probably do it without even thinking about it. It's really in our DNA to be able to make those connections. So it's great when people actually recognise the value that that's bringing to the ecosystem. The people that I work with are constantly flagging new and interesting things all the time to me. And they'll mention MarraBio and say, have you thought about this for MarraBio? Or there'll be another portfolio company that they'll say, there's something out in robotics at the moment. Would that be applicable to another portfolio? So I do feel like I'm uniquely positioned in our investment arm to be able to tap into all that intelligence and expertise that we've got across the organisation.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think having, like I was saying before, having these sort of smaller companies that each have got a different piece of the puzzle, you can be an expert on the thing that you're doing, but that's often not enough to solve these big challenges that we face, in across these different areas. But having that kind of overview, I guess it must be really exciting to be able to make those introductions and see them develop into kind of new technologies, new products, new services, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I suppose that goes back to what we were saying about innovation and interdisciplinary, the way that you can put teams together with different expertise, and something that you developed 30 years ago for one application ends up completely over here doing something completely different. That really is the benefits of being able to work at an innovation centre for me, actually, seeing those different things come together.
Yeah, absolutely. Our chairman has got this sort of joke where he'll come up with some, other wacky idea. Oh, could we do this? And we'll sort of sit and think about it. Oh, didn't we do this? We've got something in the freezer from about 15 years ago that did that. And then, you sort of don't think about it at the time. It was something we did for a collaborator or some random project. And you think, oh, hang on, actually, that could be useful for this new challenge or technology. And then developing it, then, it's good. And to have that commercial vehicle, I think, is really useful.
Mm.
And I think the other thing is what's nice about the support from CPI, from the funding agencies as well, is just I think making it kind of a really sort of friendly environment to get academics out from universities and taking their technologies into industry too. And I know, as I mentioned, it wasn't something I necessarily saw as a natural fit for myself. I wasn't aiming to necessarily do this when I kind of started my degree, however many years ago. And I think it can be very scary. It's quite daunting to think, within the university, you're in a quite protective environment. You've just got to do your research, and, there's already purchasing systems and HR systems, legal systems, everything that you might need. And so suddenly kind of be out in the wide world where not only have you got to try and do something that's going to be a commercial success, but also just, the day-to-day logistics of running all this stuff and making sure, that this document's signed and that this thing can be bought and everything. I think it is quite daunting, but I think having the various sort of support mechanisms, things through sort of like the iCure, the Northern Accelerator grants, Innovate UK, and then also having really kind of sort of friendly, easy to work with organizations like CPI, it just makes that whole journey a bit easier and maybe a bit less scary. And hopefully, I think as that support continues and maybe is added to, we'll see more academics perhaps making that leap and taking their technologies out into the ecosystem, which I think, will be a great benefit to the UK.
Yeah, I certainly hope we see that. Yep. Like you said, Dan, it's been quite a long journey, the 30 years of technology development to where you are now. But the spin-out journey's been relatively quick. Things are happening at quite a pace now. Where do you think you're going to get to in the next 5 years? And what are you most proud of today as you sit here?
Thank you for the question. I mean, I think it's a really exciting time right now. We're about a year and a half old or just over that. I'm hoping, we're just at the sort of basic inflection point where things are really taking off. And, it's a very exciting time. The first products on the market. We've got plenty of things coming in the pipeline. I'm looking forward to us moving into new areas. So, trying to get into these more regulated spaces, tapping into new markets, and then, seeing what else we can do as the technology develops. So I'm hoping in the next 5 years, we'll continue to grow. Really, I hope that we're still going to be based here in the Northeast, providing that sort of place for high-tech jobs and high impact and, economic growth within the region. And then in the future, we'll see how things go. As things continue to grow, we'll work with sort of larger organizations. Perhaps one of those things will develop into a sort of exit or acquisition. Or, if things continue to keep growing, then it might even be ended up on the stock market or something. So, that's where we're hoping to be. And, watch this space, I guess.
Yeah, best of luck with it, Dan. I've really enjoyed speaking to you today. And, just seeing the progress that you've made, I'm sure the sky's the limit. Thanks very much for coming in to talk to me.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. It's been great.
Thank you for listening, and make sure to join in on more conversations with people that are shaping our future. You can learn more about CPI by visiting uk-cpi.com. Let's innovate together.